Veloce Podcast.
Hello.
We're on episode 19.
We are.
So, gosh, almost
We're nearly
number
halfway
20.
through a year of it, aren't we?
Perhaps we should celebrate when it gets to 20.
Yeah.
We made it that far and people are still listening.
Yeah.
And it's actually got bigger.
They must have nothing else to do.
Yeah, you guys must be bored. No, only joking, obviously. No, thank you for listening on our podcast or watching us through our Veloce Driving YouTube channel. Either way is always much appreciated. So
Subscribe at the bottom if you like it. We like that.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting a lot of lovely comments and people coming in. So yeah, please subscribe if it's your thing. Obviously, no pressure, it's not, but if it is, great. So come on then, Rich, what have we been up to this week?
Well, we've got an interesting week this week. We went to Croft, didn't we, up near Middlesbrough in the northeast.
Yeah.
So we're quite where we are, right, in kind of sort of the northwest of England, aren't we? We're sort of between sort of Manchester and Chester, that kind of area. So it's not that far for us, but if you're down south, it's a hell of a long way to Croft.
Yeah.
When you lived in Wokingham, it was a long way to Croft, I'm guessing.
That's how I always remembered it. This chap, I better not say his surname, but Daniel, I used to race with him, and any time I had to come up to Croft for a job, a coaching job or anything like that, I'd stay at his, and it used to feel like the other end of the world, and he used to live right next to an army barracks.
Yeah, Catterick probably.
That's it, yeah. And it just always felt forever. I mean, I was only about 17, 18 at the time, and I remember he used to work in...
It was probably a good 5-6 hours though, was it?
Yeah, something like that. And he used to work in a Little Chef. And I remember meeting him there because I couldn't find where he lived. But anyway, so we were there. So we were there with our young Scottish female racing driver called Sarah Thompson. Actually, really interesting. So I know we've mentioned her a few times. Forgive us to keep repeating this, but I'm really quite excited about it. So as you probably know if you're a regular listener, apologies if you're not. So Sarah, from Scotland, 21, never raced, never did karts, nothing.
Never done any track days or anything.
Always wanted to, but her father works abroad a lot, and then COVID happened and things, and he raced himself in British GTs well back in the day, but I think he purposely wanted to keep Sarah away from it, just because of the fact that the commitment, the money, everything involved, time, everything. However, as for a lot of us, life has changed a lot now. So she still really wanted to do it. So it was like, right, let's do this now. And she's done, up till Croft, 2 track days, an ARDS, and then thrown into a race meeting, which is not how we would normally do things, let's say. But it actually, bizarrely, works really well because it threw her a huge amount of responsibility. Now, not every personality type would cope with that, but despite the fact that out the car she's quite timid, isn't she?
She is, yeah.
And she has some issues in the fact that she's severely deaf, that kind of thing. Yet in the car, it's not the same person. It's like Jekyll and Hyde. It's no fear, pushes beyond belief. I mean, it's very rare for me to sit next to a driver with that little experience and pick it up like that. So I just want to say huge congratulations to her in general. But then we went to Croft and we both sat with her, didn't we?
Well, we need to get another day in because her next race is Alton Park, which is not the most forgiving circuit in the UK.
And it's coming up on what, the 3rd of July?
Yes, the first weekend of July, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we wanted to get her out on track and just give her a bit more track time, really. It's been so hard to find track days, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So the Porsche Club very kindly fitted us in. And we went along to Croft and spent the day with it, didn't we?
The other thing is, like, we believe a lot in data, video analysis, visual techniques, drawing. There's a number of things you can do with a driver. But when they're very early on, it's very useful to, not continually, but sit with them. And we needed to drive and show Sarah also the importance of braking. So she'd done it on the sim, but the difference with this sim, as much as I love them and I think it's a great part of the package, you don't get the force, you don't get the same feeling. As soon as you're a passenger in a car and somebody's driving fairly quick, it's like a roller coaster. There's a whole different sensation. And it just clicked, didn't it? And Her braking became much better, much later. Her timing, but the fact
carrying speed through the quick bits, that was what impressed me.
For me, that's always been her strong point. Is she's got no fear, which you have to manage, of course.
Yeah, no fear is actually not
always
not
the
great.
best.
But she's brave. Exactly. Probably a better way of putting it.
Yeah, and I'd always say it's easier to slow a drive down than speed them up.
Yeah.
And through the quick stuff, she's just got no, there's no concerns there. It's just inner belief and go for it. So we worked on more technical elements, and the great thing with Croft, it's not huge, but there's lots of variety of corners, isn't there?
Yeah.
You've got quite a difficult hairpin. First complex is tricky, chicanes. You've got also areas with camber changes, and then you've got very quick sections. So all really useful stuff. And to be honest, I came away from the day a bit blown away with how good she was.
Yeah, she was great.
And a few people kindly were like, "Oh, it must be down to you guys." And in my head, I thought, "I'm not sure. I think she's just really good." So really excited. Oulton is a different kettle of fish, and the fact that the only thing with Oulton, it's one of the best circuits in the UK, but it's also one of the most punishing. So for us, that's why it was very important for us with any driver to make sure they're as prepared as they can be with their money and availability and all that kind of thing. So, produce something that suits them, but get as much in as we can. So, fingers crossed for that. So, we did that, which was great. Had a few other exciting things that I can't really talk about much at the moment, but when it comes to...
Watch this space.
Yeah, presenting and general commentary, racing.
All the coaching things we've got coming up. We've got opportunities for. Early days yet, but we've got
we've got
potentials.
In a nutshell, we can say there's going to be a very exciting race academy that will be linked to a very high team. So for people coming out of karting onwards, so that's really mega. So that's all happening in the pipeline. And we're also producing, I can't say too much, but some very exciting, unusual track days, let's say. So lots to watch out for, and we will announce as soon as we're allowed to, won't we?
We will.
So moving on then, let's start talking about road cars to start with.
Start with road cars. So as we often do, because obviously the cars everybody wants, are always the expensive ones, aren't they? And this is a prime example, really. Where Ferrari have got some great products around at the moment, haven't they? And they've just brought out another one. So following what McLaren have done with the what's it called? It begins with A. The Artura, that's it.
Artura,
I can never remember. Which is a V6 hybrid.
Yeah.
So Ferrari have brought their version out, and of course, being a Ferrari, it's beautiful. Yeah. It's a really pretty car.
Yeah.
There's a few people have said online they're not quite sure where it fits in the lineup.
But what's the Ferrari called?
It's called the 296 GTB.
Yeah.
And it's the first V6 mid-engine Ferrari since the Dino.
Yeah, which is quite exciting because the Ferrari Dino is probably one of the most famous Ferraris out there. And this is the first in a long time of mid-engine V6, but also hybrid as well.
Yeah, it's the first time they've electrified what they consider a mainstream car.
Yeah.
So of course, obviously, people think of Ferrari, it's like the mid-engine V8s, isn't it?
Yeah. So
this is the first time it's a V6 because they're phasing out the F8 Tributo, which I think is the current V8 one that's going at the end of 2022.
Yeah.
To be replaced by this thing.
Yeah. So this is mainstream electrified Ferrari, which kind of proves the point. I know last week we talked about fully synthetic new fuels, which I believe will go ahead, but it does show that all major manufacturers will certainly at least have hybrids on the cards for their sports and supercars, because certainly as a combination it's not necessarily costly for the manufacturer because you've got two types of technologies in one, so
and the electric engine, the electric motor on this car is really quite powerful. It's like 280 horsepower. It's quite a powerful electric motor,
which is unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's got plenty of poke from the electrics. Yeah, because obviously that kind of technology's grown all the time. Yeah, and you do think a combination of the two has got to be a few. The way to think of it is it's not an electric. You can plug this in. Yeah. But hybrids that you don't have to plug in make a lot of sense.
Oh, absolutely. So I think, like we were saying last week, you're going to have your electric, your fully synthetic new version of fuel, which will also be tied with hydrogen, and then you're going to have your hybrids. And I think supercars are going to love the fact that they can keep both, because you have this amazing amount of torque with electric that you can't get with a combustion engine. For anybody that's driven any form of electric car, it could be something tiny, big, whatever, you have very instant power and torque that you really struggle to get. So of course you combine that with a combustion engine, becomes very exciting stuff. So like you say, this is kind of to rival the McLaren Artura, so that'll be interesting to see how that fares.
But what I like about what the Ferrari have done is they've made sure it's a pretty object.
Yeah,
it's a very Ferrari thing to do. So okay, it's got form and it's got function, but the form of it is just as important to Ferrari.
Yeah. No, I have to say, as a child, always loved Ferrari, Lambos, McLarens. I guess like everybody, right? And then I grew up and I fell in love with Porsche, and unfairly, I'd spent a lot of time with many manufacturers, McLaren as well being one of them, but not enough time with Ferrari, and I unfairly assumed that they were a little bit behind the times when it came to certain areas. And you know what? I've been lucky enough, both of us, to drive some modern Ferraris, and you know what? That is so not the case.
They're pretty special things,
really
aren't they? As you would hope they would be.
Yeah, they've always been special in the fact that they sound fabulous, they drive well, and they're a piece of art, but in other areas they'd fall down. Well, those other areas seem to really come on, like their suspension, their general technology, build quality, all of the elements that were notorious have changed, and that for me is suddenly a game changer. You know, for anybody in the market when we're advising clients on what to get, you know, Ferrari for me now is a much more serious thing that I would encourage people to have than I did in the past. But it'll be interesting to see against McLaren how that gets on. So this is what, 231,000 start price?
Start price. They've only released the price in euros, I think, so it's whatever it...
okay, so equates to.
Because I don't think you can actually buy one yet. I think it's coming out towards the end of the year, isn't it? I think they've said, right, here it is. They said to the press, right, here it is.
Yeah.
So they've all been talking about it. And
I mean, it looks like any Ferrari. It looks like a Ferrari.
It's a cool looking thing.
It's an amazing thing. But it would be nice to see it. We're certainly chatting with Ferrari and others to try to get our hands on it, have a drive, do a piece on that. You know, it would just be great to just see what it's like, mid-engine, electrified. It's a big step for them, isn't it? You know, to, like say, go from the Dino to this and it be electrified as well. Be really lovely.
It's Ferrari. It'd be fine. It's like Porsche, isn't it? You know. It's always said if they made a transit van and stuck Ferrari badges on it, they'd sell it, wouldn't they?
Yeah, but hey,
it's probably underselling it a bit because it'd be a great transit van.
Oh, you know what? I'm dead excited about it. So moving away from obviously our sports supercars, which are for people like ourselves a little bit out of reach, let's say, as much
well,
as
we have a bit of a soft spot for golf, don't we? We've had Golf R's and things.
Yeah.
And I think with the Mark 8, we've been a little bit disappointed, which is probably a bit harsh on it, because the more you see them around, the more they grow on you, and you start to think, actually, that looks like a really quality bit of kit.
And it has evolved and got better in many, many ways. I think it's just the 7.5, well, the Mark 7 7.5 was such a great car. Of course, that makes it hard to beat, and people's expectations grow. And I think the Mark 8, the jump, there has been a jump, but I don't think it was quite the jump people had hoped for. Let's put it that way.
It's gone, but some of that is legislation in the way that they do things.
Of course,
but, you know, and you can't get a manual in any of them really.
Well, you can the GTI.
But how long that'll go on for, I don't know, because I was reading that the Jaguar, the new XE, you can't get a manual because nobody bought it. So perhaps there's not a desire for it anymore.
But it is interesting because with Porsche there is.
Yeah.
You know, so you think
it's probably not as mainstream
going
a car.
to be. Yeah, but then you say, would you say a GTI and an R and that kind of thing is mainstream? I don't know.
Well, you see a lot of GTIs around, don't you?
You do, but then surely these are the people that love driving.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, why not get a normal Golf?
Well, yeah, but I think Volkswagen know the market, don't they?
Yeah. So anyway, so this is the Golf GTI ClubSport 45.
So it's 45-year anniversary of the original Golf GTI.
Yeah, so a fairly special car.
Yeah.
Trying to make a statement.
And they fiddle about with it. They're trying, aren't they? They're fiddling about with it. And apparently, it's a good car.
Yeah.
But it's not quite there. And of course, the benchmark is such a talented thing, which is the Civic Type R.
Yeah.
Which sadly looks like a dog's breakfast.
Well,
it's not the prettiest car in the world.
And that's my opinion.
I think, yeah.
No offence to anybody that's got one, because actually, you know what? It's one of the, for that market and price range, it's probably one of the best driver's cars you could ever get. And it's got one of the best. One of the best gearboxes. They, like you mentioned, weighted the gearbox.
Fabulous engine.
So you've got loads of feel, feedback, all that. So it's certainly not meant as in a negative against the Honda Type R. It's just the visual element is, as it can be for those cars, quite trying, less understated. Now it just depends what you want, doesn't it? We prefer more understated unless it's something, well, for me anyway, like a GT car, sports car, supercar. But it's each to their own. But yeah, so this obviously being the anniversary of the ClubSport, but it's more expensive than the R, isn't it? Which is interesting.
It's more money than the R.
But is it better than the R?
I don't know. I mean, it's more. I think it's it's sharper, it's stiffer, it's all those kind of things.
But it's still front wheel drive.
It's still front wheel drive.
And that for me is a bit of a thing because
I think it scrabbles a bit from grip. From what I've seen of it and what I've read of it, it scrabbles a bit. Where the R never just gets on with it.
Well, exactly. As you know, I've got an R, and one thing that I always compliment about it is you never, ever, ever get any wheel spin. It's just astonishing the traction that thing has. So for me, I mean, I haven't driven the ClubSport yet. That's something we're dealing with Volkswagen with at the moment. To get a true feel and understanding, you never know 100% till you drive it, do you? Because it could completely convert us, and you might think, wow, this is such a cool thing. But as it stands on paper and what we've read, it's not quite.
It's not quite there. But I think the benchmark for the class is
hard. It's a hard
with the way
class.
that the Volkswagen have set it out. But of course, the thing is, with the Golf, the desirability is probably a lot higher than the Civic.
Yeah.
Because the build quality is beautiful in them, as it always is.
And they're understated.
They're understated, and they're like I say, you see more of them around, and you start to think, actually, it looks pretty cool, that car.
Yeah, and what I mean by understated, I don't mean boring, but just as in, it's not, hello, look at me, yeah, I'm a boy racer. It takes away that image, which I think in the UK we're known for being a bit conservative, and people like that, so it works well. Now we drove the McGann Trophy R, didn't we? And we said it was all just trying a bit too hard.
Yeah, and the thing with that car, it needed to be on a track.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah,
it was all right as a road car and a mega on a track.
Yeah.
The Golf GTI is probably in the middle.
Yeah. Better as a road car, maybe not quite as good on the track.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It all depends what you're buying this car for, right? So the Type R, if it's purely a track car, to be fair, go for it. Out of everything we've just discussed, it's
the Trophy R, you mean, not the Type R?
Sorry, yeah. No, not the Trophy R, the Type R.
Yeah, I think the Type R is a good road car, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but what I mean is, I believe out of all three, I think that would still be the best on track as well.
Yeah.
From what they've done, I think it would be the best all rounder.
Yeah.
But the Trophy R, would be a phenomenal thing on track, but would lose out on the road. Whereas if you could have a car that could do everything, what I mean by that is a Type R, you rock up, you drive it on track, like a lot of people do on track days, and you leave again in that car, driving it home. That's probably the car to have. But obviously it depends. Like I have a Golf R, I'm never going to track it. As much as I love track cars, I'd have a race car or I'd get a different track car. So for me, the Golf R is everything suited for me, for my needs. So of course, this is where your personal preference comes in, and it depends what you want from a vehicle, doesn't it? But it's quite an exciting time in that market. There's a lot going on, isn't there? A lot of rivalry, and I think for anybody like ourselves that can't afford that next step, these are the cars that you'd be looking at.
Yeah,
If you're class yourself as a driver or somebody who enjoys driving, then these are the sort of cars you're looking at. So that kind of links us nicely into driving.
Driving, yeah.
Doesn't it?
So last week we were a bit tracky focused, weren't we? Because we talked about coaching and the importance of the driver coach and that kind of stuff. So this week we thought we'd go a bit more roady.
Yeah.
And
you can still link it to track, by the way.
Yeah, you can.
Like a lot of what we talk about, road and track doesn't necessarily have to be entirely separate. Of course, there are differences, but there are a lot of things that tie in. But yeah, we decided we have obviously a lot of mixed viewers, and some love the track stuff, some like to know a bit more about the road stuff. So we thought we'd go slightly more focused towards the road this week. Yeah,
so we've been working on a little project working with driver confidence, haven't we? Nervous driver, not necessarily nervous, but people, some nervous, some just wanting a refresher. So kind of sort of people with more advanced in years and things like that. And it's been quite an interesting exercise of how to help them keep themselves a little bit safer on the road. Just not telling them you must hold the steering wheel like this and all that kind of stuff. None of that. About helping them to read the road and read situations and make sure that they're arriving at the right time in the right gear at the right speed and all that kind of stuff, and how best to go about that for them.
Absolutely, and I think this is where, and I don't want to sound like we're blowing our own trumpet here by any stretch, but this is where our NLP practitioner comes in, our understanding of psychology, because we've been dealing with, as you do in sport, all different personalities, experiences, issues, positives, the whole lot. But of course, when you're dealing with people that may have had more severe situations on the road and reasons to have anxiety, and even getting into a road car. I had somebody this week who, it was a big deal just to even sit in a road car again. Really fascinating subject, isn't it, really? But there are little, and I call them golden gems or driving gems, that you can give people of all levels, of all confidence levels as well, that can just really help reassure you as a driver, and also know that what you're doing is right. Because in the UK, and I don't want to get controversial here, but we have become quicker pace. There's less police on the road. It's very busy. It can be quite aggressive for some individuals. That can be quite nerve-wracking. So these little driving gems can just help people feel more prepared, more secure, and more confident in what they do.
Yeah. So essentially, what I was trying to do with people is try and help them to create some time, because the earlier you pick up on hazards and plan for them, the easier they are to deal with. Where when they catch you out, or you've not dealt with them in time and they become a bigger problem, it's much harder to sort out. So what I talk about is how I try and help people to understand how they can read the road through deliberate things that are put there, like road surfaces and white lines and signposts, through to things that are not necessarily deliberate, which could be all kinds of stuff like road surfaces, like potholes or tyre marks. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's making observational links between what you're seeing and what you should be perceiving and therefore planning for as a driver.
That's the thing, because quite often, obviously we've mentioned it before, look ahead, gain information, but that's one element. You can look ahead and scan back and forth and gain the information, but that's not the end of the job. You then need to do something with that information, don't you?
Yes.
And that's where you need to process and understand what that information is telling you, and then looking for almost clues and cues to then help you in advance, so you never get to a point where you are surprised, and I know that might seem daft, because you think surely there must be times you're surprised on the road, and I'm sure with the best will in the world that will happen.
Absolutely, everybody does at some point.
Overall, you're aiming for as best as you can get, aren't you?
Yeah.
Ultimately. So how would you, if you explain to people how you would do that then?
Well, I generally start with helping people to understand a bit about road markings, which sounds like the most dry subject in the world. and I guess on one level it is. But as a driver, recognising that what the road markings are trying to tell you, so that you can see further ahead, oh right, the highways agency are trying to make something jump to my attention here. Same with things like warning triangles and signposts. The highways agency only put things out for a reason. So when you're coming along and you see a corner, like chevron sign, for example, it's because there's been crashes.
Yeah.
So they're trying to make you as a driver, you don't really need to know how severe the bend is. From further back, you just think, okay, right, I'm coming into a problem here. From all the information and traffic management that's been done in that area, you don't need to know what it all means. You just think, right,
often
something's
I
happening here.
To people that unfortunately they're not proactive, they're reactive.
They're reactive, yeah.
So what that means is quite often it can be an accident black spot. It might not necessarily be that severe, but it means there has been issues. So therefore it's a little problem area, so you need to be even more prepared than normal for this area. And it's most of us, and hey, we're not perfect. I can't promise that every time I get in the car am I 100% super professional, focusing on driving and thinking about everything around me and linking those clues and doing exactly that. But I do my best. We're all human, but I do my absolute best to try and always link that.
You never get it right all the time.
No,
That's impossible.
Exactly. But I think it's just, you've got to make the effort to try. And whether you're really into driving or not, this leans on safety, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Element. And
it doesn't mean not enjoying it either.
No.
You know, if you're driving and you're looking for these clues and you're looking to piece things together and make the links in your own head, that can be good fun.
Yeah.
You know.
So a couple of little gems: more paint, more danger.
Yeah.
So if you see lots of slows or long centre white lines,
hatch markings, anything like that, really.
Anything like that. More paint, more danger. Be aware. And then, of course, yellow-backed signs are another giveaway, aren't they?
Accident black spots, generally yellow-backed signs.
So,
and of course, where you'll find is if there's a road near you that's a busy, like, commuter route, there'll be a lot more traffic management on that because there's a higher level of accidents and incidents.
Yeah.
But it's almost as useful, if not more so, on a road you've never been down before. So you're driving along and everything's fine. All of a sudden, in the distance, you see a yellow-backed sign and a load of paint on the road. You think, right, okay, need to be careful here. And the key thing as well with making the observation is then to make sure you link it with what's going on behind you. Because the environment behind you is much, much harder to control. Yeah. So if you look behind you and there's somebody really close, or they're on the phone, or whatever it is, you need to try and communicate with that person. So brake a bit earlier, do things a bit more gently, that kind of stuff. So, but you've got to make that observation link in the first place, so that you know what action to take to deal with the hazard before it becomes a bigger problem.
And the only... I think we've covered this really well. The only thing I want to add in is roads you know well can also be a big hazard. And I've certainly done it. And I'm sure if we're all honest with ourselves, have you ever had a journey where you get from A to B and you think, I don't remember the journey? Where the fact that you know that route so well, so inside out and where it's going, that you almost switch off from driving. And unfortunately, you're more likely to have an incident on a road that you know inside out because of that. So as Richard said quite rightly about roads that you don't know, but also roads that you know, just remember, don't switch off. You might know the sharpness of the bend, you might know there's a farm around the corner, or whatever it might be, but you still don't know if a tractor might pull out, or that there's a horse riding around there.
Or there's mud on the road that wasn't there before.
Absolutely. So just because you know the environment very well doesn't necessarily mean it's not a changing environment. It's not like a race circuit where it's much more secure. It's actually constantly changing. So all I'd say to anybody is roads they know well, be even more strict with yourself if you can. You know, we're not trying to say we're saints and we do nothing wrong, or trying to preach to people, because that's not what we're about. But just if you can, if you recognise yourself off thinking about work, other things, and you're bombing along this country road that you know inside out, just try to remind yourself, am I going around this bend that I can't see? Can I stop safely? Can I stop with the space I can see in? That kind of thing. Just little gems, again, like that can make such a difference to you and people around you. So yeah, so we just thought we'd focus a bit on that, because it's so easy to obviously focus so much on the racy side. But of course, vision, anticipation, looking for links, clues, that kind of thing, all tie into racing as well. So that's the thing. What's amazing about this is it's not as separate as people think. It's just the hazards are different. That's all. So I think we've covered that hopefully well. Any questions, of course, on anything we've discussed, whether it's about the Ferrari, the Golf, or of course talking more about reading the road, or whether it's track based, please get in touch. We appreciate your emails and messages. So anything that we've sort of glossed over and not gone into depth with, please ask away and we'll happily fill in the gaps. So moving on to motorsport then, which we're trying to reduce more this week because we have a tendency between us being so passionate about it. We could spend all day just talking about motorsport, which I'm sure there's listeners that could also listen all day to that, but not everybody. So we'll keep this as short and sweet as we can. But if we start with Formula One then.
Yeah, so French Grand Prix, which is an epic. Some people were saying it's probably the best Grand Prix that's ever been at Paul Ricard, because Paul Ricard can be a bit processional as a racetrack. But this was a really good one.
Yeah.
So just to go through the teams again, like we did, start with Red Bull. So there wasn't a lot in it between Mercedes and Red Bull, was there really, over the course of the weekend? Well, Verstappen stuck it on pole, led for about 300 yards, and then fired up the escape road.
Yeah, so, the car, apparently there's a real heavy, breeze.
It was windy,
back. You call it a backwind? I'm trying to think what you call it. Tailwind, that's it. And tailwind.
Tell me the word you're looking for.
Backwind sounds weird.
That's an entirely different thing.
Anyway, hopefully you know what I mean. So he said he really struggled to get it turned in for turn one, and because of that, lost the place to Lewis. And it's so easy as an F1 fan to think, oh well, that's it, and Lewis is going to just burn off into the distance, and that'll be that. But actually, the opposite happened. It was close, literally, and I don't mean just with those two, all the way through the field, wasn't it?
It was a good race.
Really, really intense, which has made Formula One extra special this year. We finally got a year where Mercedes are being challenged, and everybody that watches it, just watch Toto Wolff's body language. It is so different to all the other years. He's very, very quiet, short.
His interviews, he's not flowery in his interviews like normal. He's very to the point.
Yeah,
I want to go.
Which would suggest to me that there is some serious pressure going on within the team right now to get back ahead, because I think they've been so comfortable, and you get used to that, right? And you get used to a point of winning all the time. Anything else is just a disaster. And that's kind of happening, isn't it? So it actually helps Red Bull with strategy, didn't it, this time?
It did. So they turned the tables on Mercedes, because the Mercedes in Barcelona two-stopped, if you remember, and beat Red Bull because at the end of the race Verstappen's tyres had gone and Lewis caught and passed him. Well, Red Bull turned the tables and did exactly that. They double-stopped, where the Mercedes tried to one-stop. And of course it all came undone, and Valtteri Bottas exploded on the radio.
Yeah, and that's not very Valtteri. Valtteri's
F and Jeff, they had to beep it all out.
Well, Valtteri's very PC and a real team player. Whether he wants to be, I don't know, but he certainly is. And you could see the frustration, and his first words were, "Why don't people listen to me?" With a few extra bits, but
sure.
And actually it does give you an insight though, because you think so Valtteri said it, and then later when the race finished, also Lewis said, "I told you that strategy wouldn't work." And you think, that's interesting. So you've got obviously all this information, you've got your engineers, you've got all these people running individual departments live at the circuit, yet both drivers said the same thing. Now, I'm not saying the drivers are always right, but on that occasion it kind of showed, didn't it? Ignoring the drivers paid a price.
Yeah, it did.
And Red Bull lucked in. Well, not lucked in. They worked
They
incredibly hard. In the fact that they thought, you know what, we're going to play your own game, and we're going to do better than you.
Yeah, and it worked perfectly. It was like 2 laps to go. He caught and passed him, didn't he?
Yeah, and also, Checo Perez had another amazingly strong race. Because one thing with Perez is he's a race day man. Which is what matters. You could qualify all the time at the front, but you've got to get the results, and that's where Checo Perez is pretty special, isn't he? He has this ability to go long on tyres more than anybody else on that grid. And like you listen to the radio, it's like plan A plus 5 laps. Go long, keep going long. It's just amazing what he achieves. And at the start, he looked like he was falling off from the front runners, but apparently that was all in the plan of going long. Quite interesting really, and looking at the different strategies. So what about Ferrari then?
Well, Ferrari again, I mean, probably certainly my favourite driver and one of your favourite drivers both drive for Ferrari.
Yeah.
And I think they're getting that car into places it shouldn't be in qualifying. Because so it's further up the grid come the start than it should be, because they just disappeared in the race. They neither of them finishing the points.
Yeah, and it's a shame because we all know Charles Leclerc is probably one of the greatest on the grid at this, era. Anybody who's watched the up and coming ranks will say the same, I'm sure. And very, very special driver. But Sainz as well, as I mentioned it time and time again, has impressed me. And I watched an interview with Trevor Carlin, who's brought a lot of drivers through the ranks, junior ranks, to Formula One. And interestingly, Chandok was giving him an interview and said about Sainz, and was like, so do you think Sainz will struggle this year, get walked all over by Leclerc, a bit like what happened to Vettel? And Trevor Carlin said, no chance. I think people will be surprised how fast he will be. And this was all before the season started.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's exactly what's happened. Sainz has proved, you know what? I can get into any car, drive around any problem and be on the pace. And that's what he's achieved. But the big problem for Ferrari is they've got no race pace. And that's what they need to work on.
It must be something to do with the tyres, because the Leclerc was struggling with the tyres all weekend. He could with the fronts especially. Yeah. And obviously in the race, they must be... There's something that's set up on the Ferrari isn't working with the crappy Pirelli tyres that they have to work with.
Yeah, well, anyway.
Which is not Pirelli's fault. Pirelli are making the tyre they've been told to design, but they
hey,
deliberately dumb the tyres down, don't they?
But I do believe Ferrari have got two of the best drivers on the grid.
Oh, yeah.
And not just in the fact of their pace, but their pairing is how they get on with each other. I think has worked very well. So very quickly to McLaren. So, of course, Lando had another strong weekend in the points, but pleased to say Ricciardo had a good weekend.
Yeah, he drove better. I think it's coming together for him slowly.
Absolutely. And well, if we can quickly say, we've watched free practice 1 and 2, and in free practice 2 for this weekend, where is he?
Second.
So
Max.
I know obviously free practice you never know for sure, but I think Ricciardo, whatever was going on with that car, it's finally coming together for him.
Well, I read a thing that it's interesting, this about the psychology of it, that he hasn't been home since the beginning of the lockdown, the first lockdown, because Australia's been shut.
Yeah.
So he went to the Australian Grand Prix and they came away, didn't they? He hasn't been home.
Yeah.
And I think he's struggling a bit with homesickness. He's not seen his family, he's not seen his friends.
Yeah, and there is a difference. You can have all these people around you, but anybody in those shoes, there's people that you love and trust, and there'll be so many people that you naturally can never really have the same connection with because of the position you're in.
But you just wonder how much that's been a factor.
Well, psychology is such a big part of it, like with Valtteri and others, Gasly and.
Well, if you look at Sainz, Carlos, he very, very close to his dad. His cousin's his manager.
Yeah.
So everywhere he goes, he's got his kind of his network, world around him. So that'll give you massive confidence, make you strong.
Absolutely. So AlphaTauri, Gasly again.
Oh, brilliant drive again! Yeah.
I really want, and I don't mean this badly, but I really want him to be picked up by a top team, just not Red Bull, because I think there are certain issues with Red Bull, whether it's Marco, Christian Horner. I don't know the ins and outs, but there's something not quite right.
It's quite a brutal regime.
And I think Gasly it's not been a flash in the pan since he's been back at Toro Rosso. Not Toro Rosso now, sorry. AlphaTauri. He really, really is on fire. So he deserves something. But leading on to that, Tsunoda.
Yeah, but Tsunoda again was quick again today.
Yeah.
And this is the thing with Red Bull, where I think Tsunoda should be given the space because he's a really exciting driver. And I think he should be given the space to stuff a car now and again.
Yeah.
The bloke's, what is he? He's 18 years old.
Yeah.
He only started racing cars in 2018.
Yeah.
Give him time. But of course, Red Bull are already thinking, oh, they need to stop doing this. And you think, give the bloke time. Because Max was allowed to shunt constantly.
He was.
That was fine,
But so as we've said before, Tsunoda has moved to Italy. But unfortunately, Helmut Marko has actually come out with the fact that he believes he's very stubborn, lazy. He's come out with some quite harsh words. Whether that's to G him up, I do not know. I just hope Tsunoda brings it together. But you're right. Max had opportunity to make mistakes, and Tsunoda's very fast. And the thing is, you're better off with them being fast and crash, because you can actually sort that out than be slow. So he's fast, he has that in him, and like most of the greats initially will make instant. I know you've got the odd one that doesn't, like, to be fair, Lewis is coming in being pretty much from the start, astonishing. Same with Leclerc, but Tsunoda's obviously quite fiery, and he just needs a bit of time to calm down, grow up, which is what Max needed. And the difference in Max now is a completely different driver in person to what he was when he came in. So, fingers crossed they stick with him and we get to see what he's really about. So moving very quickly on to IndyCar. So they were in Road America. Yeah.
So we'll just quickly go through the race now. I'll tell you a funny story about what I heard about. So Kevin Magnussen was standing in for Rosenqvist, who had the shunt in the last round, and there was somebody overheard him and Grosjean having a chat, which I'll come back to in a second. But so Road America, all the drivers, it's one of the best circuits in America, and they all love it because it's a bit like a cross between sort of Cadwell and Spa or something. It's got really fast flowing sections, but there's no runoff, and there's it's a proper old school American track. And interestingly, it's been one of the closest IndyCar seasons for a long time.
Yeah.
Because Newgarden was pretty much not dominant, but he was quickest in practice. He was on pole. He led most of the race, and then the gearbox went. But throughout the entire race, his mirrors were full of Alex Palau, so it wasn't as if Palau completely looked into it.
Oh yeah.
Palau pushed him really hard through the race, and then won the race and is now leading the championship. But that's the 6th race in succession, IndyCar race, where the person who's led the most laps hasn't won the race.
Yeah, and that's the thing with IndyCar. I can encourage people more to watch it. I watched IndyCar as a young girl, and then admittedly had a big break out of it when you had IndyCar, Champ Car, and all that kind of thing. Now we're back with IndyCar, and you're getting a lot of F1 drivers move over, and other very established drivers move into IndyCar. And you can't think just ovals and people going around in circles, street circuits, race circuits. And as Rich said, for people to lead, like Paul Newgarden,
like 2 hours he spent in the lead, and then
and 2 laps to
didn't
go,
finish,
lost the race.
Yeah,
and Palau, pushed him all the way and got the win. But gosh, how hard is that? But what's interesting is Palau is teammates with Scott Dixon, who is probably one of the best in IndyCar.
Probably the best in the world.
You could have as a teammate. So I'm wondering, I don't know, but how much that is helping him as as a young gun learning from the master, let's say at Ganassi, and he certainly is beginning to run now, isn't he? So it'll be really quite interesting to see what happens there.
But no, the Grosjean Magnussen thing, they were talking about, obviously because they've both come from F1. So Magnussen was saying he's now doing IMSA sports cars, and he says the tyres, there's absolutely no degradation across the stint, so you can go at 10 tenths if you want. And he says he's absolutely mega. And Grosjean was saying the first test he did in an IndyCar, he went out and he drove it all neat and tidy, made sure he got good clean exits, all that kind of stuff. Came back and thought, right, I've put a good lap together there. And said to his engineer, right, how are we lap time wise? He said, you're about 3.5 seconds off. And he was like, you're shitting me. So then he went out.
Destroying.
Yeah, so he went out and just ragged it round, got it sideways, moved it all back, really like on the ragged edge, and came back in. His engineer went, yeah, that's better.
But doesn't that show
he's
how
so
these cars
much more
have to be
excited to drive than a 41 car?
But that shows, doesn't it, why for a spectator it's also interesting to watch. It's like we were watching something earlier with Toto Wolff, Valtteri Bottas and Lewis Hamilton just in road car Mercedes, but it showed their ability as drivers. The cars were sideways, really kind of wrestling with them. And it was impressive to watch because
today watching the practice from Austria, there was a couple of points where the way they've set the cameras, you could see how quick the cars were. Because F1's biggest problem is you don't appreciate how fast they are.
Yeah.
And there was one camera sequence that they had, and it was like, whoa, they look so fast. Yeah. Then they were on board, I think, with Ocon at one point, and again, it looked like it was speeded up.
Yeah.
And F1 need to work on how they do that more with cameras, I think.
But also,
because that's the biggest. If you go and watch an F1 car live, it is mind-blowing how fast they are. Yeah. But it doesn't come across on the TV.
But for me, and this might be just me, but I like to also see them working in the cockpit.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can't see that. And it's not because you can't see in the cockpit, but you can't see what they're feeling. And you know, they have to be so precise all the time that it looks so neat, smooth and tidy that you can't appreciate how on edge the car is, I suppose. But hey, you know, it's each to their own. So let's move on anyway. So we've got the interactive question, which hopefully we've not done before this time. So this may actually be a new one.
No, again, a bit more roady. So I thought so you've got to pick any decade.
Yeah.
Obviously, since the car was invented, no point going to 1740s. So you're going to do a road trip.
Yeah.
So what car are you in? Where are you going and why? There's a lot to go at there.
Yeah. Well, road trip first. I would like to do the west coast of America again, from Seattle down to Dallas and up to Vegas, and do all the coastal routes, that kind of thing. And I'd love to do that in some form. Well, I was going to say classic Corvette, but I really fancy trying the mid-engine new Corvette, which I know is...
So you're not going back in time,
not
then?
Going back
going
in time.
now.
But surely...
Well, that's all right. You can pick a decade.
Yeah. Well, the reason is because I've not driven one, and I'm not sure about its appearance, but I've always loved Corvettes. And you know what? I think mid-engine, it's got to be pretty special. It's going to sound fabulous. In America, you've got to have a car that's American, right? And the reason I want to do the West Coast is I've done it before, but I did it for work, so I saw all these amazing places, but in a flash. And I want to go and do it as a proper holiday where you stop, you spend time in places, you take it all in, but you have to do it in an American car. So, and the only reason I'd like to do it in that is because I've not driven one, and I'm very curious to know what it's like.
Okay.
So that's kind of my answer, really. What about you?
Well, I would go 60s.
Yeah.
Front engined, open top Ferrari, so something like a 350, something like that. V12. Yeah. Down through France, over the Alps, and down through Italy.
Yeah.
That'd do me.
Yeah.
With lots of food.
With anybody
no
else?
Motorways.
Would you have a passenger?
Well, you can come with me.
Apart from me, though. If you could take anybody else, who would you take?
That is a very good question. I hadn't thought of that. Am I allowed to say Amelia Fox? No, so probably somebody like...
No, you can if you want. It's fine. Don't worry. We just won't talk after the episode. No, I'm only joking.
Obviously, he wasn't born in the 60s now. I'd go with Charles Leclerc, get him to do the driving. Or do half of the driving.
So
then he can look on in awe when I drive.
I would like to have Patrick Dempsey with me.
See, there you go.
Because he's a racing driver.
So if Patrick and Amelia Fox go off together, then we've...
Yeah, and we're back together, stuck together. No, I'm joking. No, Patrick Dempsey, because obviously being a racing driver, he'll know the States very well. I think I get the impression that he's a very nice guy or perhaps I just want to think he's a very nice guy, I don't know. But no, from what I've seen and I'm told by other drivers, he really is. So for me, Patrick Dempsey would be a great person to talk about cars, motorsport, and explore America with. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to pay for a drink if you got him with you.
So anyway, for you guys at home, please join in. So
let us know your thoughts.
What decade? Where would you go? What car? But also I've thrown in there, who would you also like to go with? So you can't just say your partner, because that's too, standard. If you could take anybody... just for the fact that interesting conversations or where they could take you or their knowledge, let us know. It'd be great to find out what your thoughts are. So next week, we've got BTCC brands, which is actually this weekend, but we're going to cover it all next week.
Yeah, we'll chat about that.
So we're going to have a big talk about that. What else have we got going on?
We've got the Styrian Grand Prix.
Yeah, so we've got that to
Red
go
Bull
on.
Ring.
So we'll obviously cover what happened this weekend, and we'll introduce, like we do, the thoughts of that weekend.
Yeah.
But BTCC, we're going to do a roundup because not a lot's happened, obviously, as of yet. So we're going to find out a lot more tomorrow and Sunday for that. So we're going to bring that into it because we've got a lot of fans of the touring car series.
Keep getting asked about that.
Exactly. So we thought we'd bring that into it, and to be fair, we watch it all the time, so it's a bit like we were trying to balance it. How much do you have? But people keep asking, so you think, you know what, let's throw it in there.
There's no Indy cars this weekend, so we can substitute touring cars for it.
Yeah. The other thing, just to announce, is next Friday we have Simon Reynolds' interview launching. So Simon has worked for McLaren as a performance manager, worked with people like Lando Norris. Oh gosh, the list is massive, isn't it?
Yeah, basically anybody who's McLaren or a McLaren Junior.
Yeah, for a very long time. Not just that, he has his own business and all the things he's done before that, but really explaining about the importance of a driver coach, but not just from our perspective, but his perspective as a fitness trainer, and the difference between a regular PT and somebody like him who really understands the science of a racing driver, going into all the details of that, what muscles are used, the repetition, but really giving us in a simplistic form an understanding of why racing drivers have to be so fit. So look out for that. We will still do our podcast, but that will be a special with Simon Reynolds, the fitness pro that he is. So hopefully you guys will find that interesting. Anyway, we will say goodbye for now. Enjoy your weekend and thank you for listening to us.
Bye.